The July sun beat down mercilessly on the prairie outside Deeming, New Mexico, turning the endless grassland into a shimmering mirage of heat and desperation, as Catherine Zimmerman stumbled forward one more step, then another, her lips cracked and bleeding, her vision blurring at the edges until the world itself seemed to tilt sideways, and she fell hard onto the dusty earth. Yates Ormond had been tracking the stolen cattle for 3 days across the open prairie, following the trail that led east from his ranch toward the border, when he spotted something that made him rein in his horse so quickly. The animal reared back on its haunches. At first he thought it might be a coyote or a fallen calf, but as he urged his mount closer, his heart seized in his chest. A woman lay motionless on the ground, her dress torn and filthy, her dark hair spread around her head like a halo against the pale grass. He was off his horse before it fully stopped, dropping to his knees beside her and pressing 2 fingers against her throat. The pulse was there, faint but steady, and relief flooded through him even as he took in the severity of her condition. Her skin burned with fever beneath his touch, her breathing shallow and rapid. He grabbed his canteen and carefully tilted a few drops of water onto her parched lips, watching as her throat worked reflexively to swallow. She did not wake. Yates looked around the empty prairie, seeing nothing but miles of grassland stretching in every direction beneath the punishing afternoon sun. The nearest town was Deeming, at least 12 miles southwest, and his ranch was even farther. He could not leave her here while he rode for help. Even in the shade, she would not survive another hour in this heat. "All right, miss," he said quietly, though she could not hear him. "I have got you now." He was a tall man, lean and strong from years of working cattle, and he lifted her carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, her body slight and delicate against his chest. He managed to mount his horse with her cradled against him, settling her across his lap with her head resting in the crook of his arm. The stolen cattle would have to wait. This woman's life hung by a thread, and he would not let that thread break. The ride back toward Deeming was the longest of Yates's life. He kept the horse at a steady walk, knowing that a faster pace might jostle her too much, might cause more harm than good. Every few minutes he would tilt the canteen to her lips again, giving her just a little water at a time. The sun moved across the sky with agonizing slowness, and still she did not wake. He talked to her as they rode, telling her stories about his ranch, about his horse, about anything he could think of just to fill the terrible silence. He did not even know her name. "You are going to be all right," he told her for the 100th time, willing it to be true. "We are almost there now. Just hold on a little longer." The truth was they were barely halfway to town, but he needed to believe his own words. He studied her face as they rode, memorizing the delicate arch of her brows, the straight line of her nose, the full curve of her lips despite their cracked and bleeding state. She was beautiful, even in this desperate condition, but more than that. Something about her struck him deep in his chest. A fierce protectiveness rose up in him, stronger than anything he had felt before. This woman, this stranger, had somehow become his responsibility, and he would move heaven and earth to save her. The sun was low on the horizon when the first buildings of Deeming finally appeared in the distance. Yates felt tears of relief sting his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. His arms ached from holding her for so many miles, his back screamed in protest, but none of that mattered. They had made it. He urged his tired horse into a faster walk, heading straight for the doctor's house on the east side of town. Dr. Samuel Hartley was just sitting down to supper when Yates kicked open his door, the unconscious woman still cradled in his arms. The doctor was on his feet instantly, clearing the examination table with one sweep of his arm and gesturing for Yates to lay her down. "Found her on the prairie," Yates said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking to her under the sun. She collapsed from exhaustion. Has not woken up. Fever and dehydration, I think. Dr. Hartley was already examining her, checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids, pressing his stethoscope to her chest. How long ago did you find her? 6 hours, maybe 7. I gave her water just a little at a time. Good, that may have saved her life. The doctor looked up at him. You carried her all the way from the prairie, had no choice. The doctor nodded, his expression grave. She is severely dehydrated and suffering from heat stroke. Her temperature is dangerously high. I need to cool her down and get fluids into her. You did well to bring her here, Mr. Ormond. Yates had not realized the doctor knew his name, but Deeming was a small town and he came in for supplies often enough. Will she live? I cannot say for certain yet, but her chances are better now than they were on that prairie. Dr. Hartley was already working as he spoke, removing her tattered dress and replacing it with a clean nightgown, placing cool cloths on her forehead and neck. Come back tomorrow morning. If she wakes, I will need to know who she is, where she came from. Yates did not want to leave, but he knew he would only be in the way. His horse needed care and food, and he needed to clean up and rest. The ride had taken everything out of him, and now that the immediate crisis was over, exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He took one last look at the woman on the table, memorizing her face once more, then nodded and left. That night he could not sleep. He lay in his room at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and wondering who she was. What had brought her out onto that prairie alone? Had she been traveling and gotten separated from her party? Had she been running from something or someone? The questions circled endlessly in his mind. He had carried her miles to safety, felt the heat of her fever through his shirt, listened to her shallow breathing for hours. She was not just a stranger anymore. She was someone he had fought to save, and he needed to know that his fight had not been in vain. When dawn finally broke, he was already dressed and heading back to the doctor's house. Dr. Hartley answered the door looking tired but cautiously optimistic. She woke about an hour ago, but only briefly. Asked for water, drank a little, then fell back asleep. Her fever has broken. I think she will pull through. The relief that flooded through Yates nearly buckled his knees. Can I see her? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. She needs rest. She was still asleep when Yates entered the small room where the doctor had moved her. In the morning light streaming through the window, she looked even more delicate than she had on the prairie. Her hair had been brushed and braided, lying over one shoulder in a thick plait the color of rich mahogany. Her face was pale but peaceful, the harsh lines of pain and dehydration already beginning to ease. Yates stood by her bedside, hands clasped in front of him, and simply watched her breathe. "Thank you," she whispered, and his eyes snapped to her face. Her eyes were open, the palest blue he had ever seen, like the sky just before dawn. She was looking directly at him. "You are awake," he said, the words inadequate but all he could manage. "The doctor told me what you did." Her voice was barely audible, weak and cracked. "You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "No, not anyone. Most would have ridden past, assumed I was already dead." She paused, taking a careful breath. "What is your name?" "Yates Ormond." "I have a ranch west of here, Catherine Zimmerman." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "I owe you everything. You owe me nothing except to rest and recover." He wanted to reach out and take her hand but held himself back, aware of the impropriety. "Can you tell me what happened? How you came to be out on the prairie alone?" Her expression clouded with pain, and he immediately regretted asking. "I was traveling with a wagon train from Missouri to California. We had trouble just past Mesilla. Cholera, my parents." Her voice broke. "They died within 2 days of each other." The wagon master said we had to leave them behind, could not risk burying them properly for fear of spreading the sickness. I helped nurse the others who fell ill, and when it finally passed, we continued on. But then we were attacked by bandits 3 days ago. They took everything. The horses, the wagons, the supplies. Killed 3 men who tried to fight back. The rest of us were left with nothing but what we were wearing. Yates felt anger rise hot in his chest. They just left you all there. The wagon master said we should walk back to the last town, stay together. But I had nothing left. No family, no money, no possessions. I could not face starting over with nothing, being a burden on strangers. She opened her eyes again, looking at him with such raw honesty it made his heart ache. I thought I would try to make it to Deeming on my own, maybe find work. I had no idea how far it was, no idea what the prairie would be like. I was a fool. You were grieving and desperate, Yates said firmly. That does not make you a fool. I nearly died because of my pride. But you did not die. You are here and you are safe and you will recover. She studied his face for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Why do you care? You do not know me. The question caught him off guard, and he found himself speaking from a place deeper than reason. I carried you 12 miles across the prairie. I felt every breath you took, every beat of your heart against my chest. I talked to you for hours, telling you to hold on, to stay with me. You are not a stranger anymore, Catherine Zimmerman. I do not know how to explain it, but you matter to me. Tears welled up in her pale eyes and spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. No one has cared whether I lived or died since my parents fell ill. No one. This time he did reach out, gently taking her hand in his. Her fingers were cool and delicate, and they curled around his with surprising strength. I care, he said simply, and I am not going anywhere until I know you are truly all right. Dr. Hartley appeared in the doorway, clearing his throat pointedly. That is enough for now. Miss Zimmerman needs rest, Mr. Ormond. Yates reluctantly released her hand and stood. I will come back tomorrow if that is all right. Catherine nodded, her eyes already drifting closed again. I would like that. Over the next week, Yates visited every day, sometimes twice a day when he could find an excuse to come into town. He watched as color slowly returned to Catherine's cheeks, as her voice grew stronger and her eyes brighter. They talked for hours, sharing their stories. He told her about his ranch, how he had come to New Mexico territory 10 years ago as a young man of 18, full of dreams of making his fortune in cattle. How he had worked for other ranchers first, learning the trade, saving every penny until he could buy his own small spread. How he had built it up slowly over the years through hard work and careful management. Until now, at 28, he had a modest but successful operation with 50 head of cattle and a small house he had built himself. Catherine told him about growing up in Missouri, the daughter of a shopkeeper and a seamstress. How she had been educated by her mother, who believed strongly that women should be able to read and write and do mathematics. How her parents had decided to seek a new life in California, hoping for better opportunities, never imagining they would not survive the journey. She was 22 years old, alone in the world, with nothing but the borrowed nightgown she wore and the memories of everything she had lost. I do not know what I am going to do, she admitted one afternoon, her voice quiet. I have no money, no skills that would be useful here. I can read and write and sew, but those things do not seem very valuable on the frontier. Reading and writing are valuable anywhere, Yates said firmly. And sewing even more so. Half the men in this territory would pay good money for someone to mend their clothes properly. As for money, we will figure something out. She looked at him with those pale blue eyes that had come to occupy his thoughts day and night. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? He had asked himself the same question 100 times, though he already knew the answer. He was falling in love with her. It had started the moment he saw her lying on that prairie, but it had deepened with every conversation, every shared story, every time she smiled at him. He knew it was fast, knew it was impractical, knew he should be more cautious. But his heart did not care about any of that. "Because I want to," he said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong, someone who has survived more in the past month than most people face in a lifetime. Because I carried you miles across the prairie and I have not been able to stop thinking about you since." Catherine's breath caught, her cheeks flushing pink. "Yates, I know it is too soon to speak of such things," he continued, his heart pounding. "I know we have only known each other a week. But I believe in being honest, and the truth is I have feelings for you, Catherine. Deep feelings. I'm not asking you to return them right now. I just want you to know they exist." She was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I have feelings for you too," she said softly. "I have tried to tell myself it is just gratitude, just the natural response to someone who saved my life. But it is more than that. When you walk into this room, everything gets brighter. When you leave, I count the hours until you return. I think about you constantly. Is that too forward of me to say?" "No." His voice came out rough with emotion. "No, it is not too forward. It is perfect." They sat together in the afternoon light, hands clasped, both of them grinning like fools. Outside the window, the sounds of deeming continued on, but in this small room, the world had contracted to just the two of them. Dr. Hartley declared Catherine well enough to leave his care at the end of the second week. She had regained her strength, and the color in her face had returned to a healthy glow, though she still tired easily. The problem was where she would go. She had no family, no money, and nowhere to stay. Yates had been thinking about this constantly, turning over possibilities in his mind. Finally, he made a decision. "Come stay at my ranch," he said when he picked her up from the doctor's house. He had borrowed a wagon for the occasion, piling it with blankets to make the ride more comfortable. "I know how it sounds, and I know what people might say, but I have a solution. My ranch hand Miguel has a wife, Rosa. They live in a small house on my property. Rosa could use help with the cooking and cleaning, and you would be staying with them, properly chaperoned. It would be temporary, just until you figure out what you want to do next." Catherine sat in the wagon beside him, wearing a simple blue dress that one of the church ladies had donated. It was slightly too big, but she had altered it with her skilled seamstress hands to fit perfectly. She looked at him with surprise and something that might have been hope. "Are you certain? I do not want to be a burden on you or on Miguel's family." "You would not be a burden. You would be a help to Rosa and—" He hesitated, then pressed on, "and you would be close by." "I like having you close by, Catherine." She smiled, that beautiful smile that made his chest feel too tight. "Then yes, I accept your offer, and Yates, I like being close by too." The ranch was modest but well kept, with a sturdy main house, a barn, corrals, and the smaller house where Miguel and Rosa lived with their two young children. Rosa was a warm, generous woman in her 30s who took one look at Catherine and immediately swept her into a welcoming embrace. Miguel, a quiet man with kind eyes, simply nodded his approval and helped carry Catherine's meager belongings into the house. "You will stay in the spare room," Rosa said, leading Catherine through the small but clean home. "It is not much, but it is comfortable. And do not worry about earning your keep. I am just happy to have another woman to talk to. Life on a ranch can be lonely." Catherine settled into the rhythm of ranch life more easily than Yates had dared hope. She helped Rosa with the cooking, the cleaning, the mending. She played with Miguel and Rosa's children, teaching them their letters and numbers. And every evening when the work was done, she would walk out to the main house where Yates lived, and they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the prairie while they talked about everything and nothing. "You ever get lonely out here?" Catherine asked one evening about a month after she had arrived at the ranch. "I used to," Yates admitted, "but not anymore." She looked at him, understanding in her eyes. "Because of me, because of you." They were dancing around something, both of them aware that their feelings had deepened and intensified with each passing day. Yates wanted to court her properly, wanted to give her time to heal from everything she had been through. But the waiting was torture when all he wanted was to pull her into his arms and never let go. "Yates," she said softly, "can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why have you not kissed me yet?" The question hit him like a lightning bolt. He turned to look at her fully, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, the hope, the longing. "Because I did not want to rush you, because you have been through so much, and I wanted to give you time to be sure of your feelings." "I am sure." She moved closer to him on the porch bench, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap Rosa made. "I have been sure for weeks. I am in love with you, Yates Ormond, and if you do not kiss me soon, I think I might go mad." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the delicate line of her jaw. Her skin was soft as silk, her eyes luminous in the fading light. "I am in love with you too, Catherine Zimmerman. I have been since the moment I found you on that prairie. Maybe even before, like my soul knew I was riding out to meet my destiny that day." When their lips finally met, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening as weeks of restrained longing finally broke free. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. They kissed until the stars came out overhead, until Rosa called from across the yard that supper was ready, until finally they broke apart, breathless and grinning. "I want to marry you," Yates said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it is fast, I know people will say we are rushing, but I do not care. I want you in my life, Catherine. Not as a guest, not as a temporary visitor, but as my wife. I want to build a future with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling wider than he had ever seen. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Deeming, with Miguel and Rosa standing as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Catherine wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric that Yates insisted on buying, a beautiful cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She looked like an angel as she walked down the aisle toward him, her dark hair piled on top of her head with small white flowers tucked into the arrangement. Yates felt his throat close up with emotion as he watched her approach, this incredible woman who had stumbled into his life and changed everything. "I love you," he whispered as they stood before the minister. "I love you too," she whispered back. Their life together began in the modest ranch house that Yates had built for himself, but which now became a home in the truest sense. Catherine threw herself into making it comfortable and welcoming, sewing curtains for the windows, planting a small garden near the kitchen, arranging the furniture to maximize the space. Yates found himself rushing through his work each day just so he could get back to the house sooner, back to her. She was nothing like he had expected a rancher's wife to be, and everything he had not known he needed. She was practical and hardworking, rising before dawn to make breakfast and pack his lunch, tending her garden, helping Rosa with the laundry and the canning. But she was also educated and opinionated, reading every book and newspaper she could get her hands on, engaging him in lively debates about politics and philosophy and the changing world beyond their little corner of New Mexico territory. "You think women will ever be able to vote?" she asked one night as they lay in bed together, her head resting on his chest. "I do not know," Yates admitted, "but I know they should be able to. You are smarter than half the men I know, Catherine. It makes no sense that you cannot have a say in how the country is run." She tilted her head up to look at him, her expression tender. "I am glad I married a man who sees me as an equal, not just as property." "You are my partner," he said firmly, "in everything. This ranch is as much yours as it is mine. Your opinions matter, your dreams matter. We build this life together, or not at all." Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, as it always was for ranchers trying to establish themselves. They had a hard winter that killed 3 of their cattle. A drought in the spring threatened their water supply. But they faced every obstacle together, supporting each other through the difficult times and celebrating the victories when they came. Catherine proved to have a head for business that surprised even Yates. She started keeping meticulous records of their expenses and income, identifying areas where they could save money or increase efficiency. She suggested they start selling eggs and butter to the townspeople in Deeming, using the chickens she had convinced Yates to buy. The extra income was small but steady, and it helped them through the lean months. "Where did you learn all this?" Yates asked, watching her work through the ledgers one evening. "My father," she said without looking up. "I used to help him in the shop. He taught me how to track inventory, how to manage accounts. He said a good business mind was not about being educated. It was about paying attention and thinking logically." She paused, her expression growing sad. "I wish he could have seen this ranch. He would have loved knowing his lessons helped build something real." Yates moved behind her chair and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pulling her back against his chest. "He would be proud of you, I am sure of it." She covered his hands with hers, leaning into his embrace. "I hope so. I hope both of my parents would be proud of the life I have made." "They would be," he said with absolute certainty. "You survived the impossible, Catherine. You lost everything and everyone, and you still found the strength to build a new life. That takes courage most people do not have." In their second year of marriage, Catherine became pregnant. The joy Yates felt when she told him was unlike anything he had experienced before, a wild, soaring happiness that made him want to shout from the rooftops. He became intensely protective, insisting she rest more, take on fewer chores, let Rosa help with the heavy work. Catherine tolerated his hovering with amused patience, reminding him gently that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and that she was perfectly healthy. "I am not made of glass," she said one afternoon when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I can still do my work." "I know, but I worry. What if something happens?" She cupped his face in her hands, her expression gentle. "Nothing is going to happen. I am strong and our baby is strong." "You have to trust that," he tried. He really did. But every time he thought about how close he had come to losing her on that prairie, his heart clenched with fear. She was everything to him now. The thought of a world without her was unbearable. Their son was born on a hot August evening in 1874, screaming his way into the world with a healthy pair of lungs and a shock of dark hair. Yates held him for the first time with trembling hands, staring down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. "He is beautiful," he whispered. Catherine, exhausted but glowing, smiled at him from the bed. "He has your eyes. And your determination. Did you hear him crying? He is going to be stubborn. Good. He will need to be growing up out here." They named him Thomas, after Catherine's father, and he became the center of their world. Yates discovered reserves of tenderness he had not known he possessed, rocking his son to sleep in the middle of the night, singing off key lullabies, making silly faces just to hear that precious baby laugh. Catherine blossomed as a mother, her natural warmth and patience making her perfectly suited to caring for their child. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around Thomas's needs and schedules. The ranch continued to grow, slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, hired another hand to help Miguel, built an extension onto the house to give Thomas his own room. Catherine's garden expanded year by year until she was producing enough vegetables to sell and deeming alongside her eggs and butter. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates took Catherine back to the spot on the prairie where he had found her. They stood together in the tall grass, his arm around her waist, looking out across the endless landscape that had almost killed her, but had ultimately brought them together. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not come along that day?" Catherine asked quietly. "Every day," Yates admitted, "and every day I thank God that I did." "Do you think it was fate? That we were meant to find each other?" He turned her to face him, looking deep into those pale blue eyes that still took his breath away. "I think I was riding out to find stolen cattle, and instead I found the woman who would become my whole world. Call it fate, call it luck, call it divine providence. I do not care what name we give it. I only care that it happened." She kissed him softly, sweetly, her hands resting on his chest. "I love you, Yates Ormond. Thank you for saving my life, not just that day on the prairie, but every day since. You gave me a reason to live when I had none, a home when I was lost, a family when I was alone. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions of life but not really living. You changed that. You made me want to be better, do better, build something meaningful. You made me whole, Catherine." They stood there together as the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange and pink. Thomas was back at the ranch with Rosa, probably getting into mischief, and they would need to head back soon. But for this moment, they simply held each other and remembered. 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emma. She was smaller and quieter than Thomas had been, with Catherine's delicate features and Yates's dark hair. Thomas, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. The house was full of noise and life and love, exactly as Yates had always dreamed it could be. The ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about Catherine's eggs and butter and vegetables, and soon she had regular customers throughout Deeming and even in the neighboring towns. She hired 2 local women to help her expand the operation, teaching them her methods and paying them fair wages. Yates's cattle herd grew to over 200 head, making him one of the more successful ranchers in the area. They built a larger barn, added another room to the house, bought better furniture and equipment. But despite their growing prosperity, they never forgot where they had come from. Catherine made it a point to help other women who found themselves in desperate circumstances, whether that meant offering them work, providing food and shelter, or simply being a sympathetic ear. She remembered too well what it felt like to have nothing, to be completely alone, and she was determined that no woman in her community would have to face that if she could help it. "You have a big heart," Yates told her one evening after she had taken in a young widow whose husband had been killed in a mining accident. The woman was staying in their spare room while she figured out her next steps. "I remember what it was like," Catherine said simply. "If you had not found me that day, if you had not cared enough to help a stranger, I would have died on that prairie. I have to pay that kindness forward. It is the only way to honor what you did for me." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you so much. I love you too." The years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. Thomas grew into a tall, sturdy boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle. Emma proved to have her mother's talent for sewing and her father's head for numbers, often helping Catherine with her business ledgers. The ranch expanded further, and they hired more hands. Miguel and Rosa eventually retired to a small house in Deeming, their children grown and starting families of their own. Catherine and Yates grew older together, their love deepening and maturing with each passing season. There were difficult times, of course. Years when the rains did not come and the cattle suffered. An outbreak of fever that swept through Deeming and took several of their friends. The usual trials and tribulations of raising children and running a business. But they faced everything together, their partnership as strong as ever. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Catherine with a gift he had been planning for months. He led her out to the front of their property, where a new sign hung above the gate. The words were burned into the wood in elegant script, "The Catherine Ranch." She stared at it in shock, tears springing to her eyes. "Yates, you cannot name the ranch after me." "I can, and I did. This ranch exists because of you, your hard work, your business sense, your determination. You took a struggling operation and helped turn it into something successful. You deserve to have your name on it. But it is your ranch. You built it. We built it," he corrected gently. "Together. And I want everyone who sees this sign to know that. I want Thomas and Emma and their children and their children's children to know that their grandmother was not just some rancher's wife. She was a partner, a builder, a woman who survived the impossible and created something beautiful from nothing." She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. "I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do. You deserve everything good in this world, Catherine, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." Thomas married at 25, bringing his wife Sarah to live on the ranch. She was a kind, practical woman who fit seamlessly into the family. Emma married a year later, a school teacher from Deeming who supported her dreams of starting her own dressmaking business. Both of their children stayed close, building houses on the ranch property, raising their own families within sight of their parents. Catherine became a grandmother at 50, then a great-grandmother at 70. She remained active and engaged well into her later years, still tending her garden, still keeping the books for the ranch's various enterprises, still taking in women who needed help. Yates aged alongside her, his dark hair turning silver, his body growing stiffer but his love for her never wavering. On a warm spring evening in 1899, when Catherine was 75 and Yates was 81, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren were scattered across the ranch property, living their lives in the shadow of the legacy Catherine and Yates had built. The sun was setting over the prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. "Do you remember the day we met?" Catherine asked, her hand clasped in Yates's as it had been for over 50 years. "Every detail," he said. "You were lying in the grass like a fallen angel. I thought my heart would stop when I saw you. You saved my life that day. No, we saved each other. I was just going through the motions before you. You gave me purpose, Catherine. You gave me everything that matters." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I was so scared that day. I thought I was going to die alone on that prairie, that my life would end without meaning. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was saying. You carried me miles to safety, Yates. You carried me through life itself. And you carried me right back," he said softly. "Every single day you carry me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Cattle lowed in the distance. Children's laughter drifted on the breeze. A horse whinnied from the barn. This place, this life, this family, all of it had grown from a chance encounter on a desperate prairie afternoon. All of it had bloomed from one man's decision to stop and help a dying stranger. "I would do it all again," Catherine said. "Every hardship, every loss, every difficult moment. All of it was worth it to end up here with you. I would ride across that prairie 1,000 times if it meant finding you," Yates said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine Ormond, the very best thing." She smiled, that same beautiful smile he had fallen in love with so many years ago. "And you are mine." The stars came out overhead, brilliant against the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter starting to prepare supper, calling for her children to come help. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Yates squeezed Catherine's hand gently, and she squeezed back, their silent communication as clear as words after 5 decades together. They had been young once, desperate and alone, thrown together by circumstance on an unforgiving prairie. They had survived against impossible odds, built a life from nothing, raised a family, created a legacy. And through it all, they had loved each other with a fierce, unwavering devotion that time could not diminish. When Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep at 84, Catherine mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given more years together than many couples could dream of, and every one of those years had been precious. She lived another 3 years, spending her days surrounded by the family they had created, telling stories about the grandfather they had loved, keeping his memory alive. On the morning Catherine died at 78, she was sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out across the prairie where Yates had found her so many years before. Her great-great-grandson, young Thomas, named for his great-great-grandfather's father, was playing at her feet. She reached down and stroked his soft hair, thinking about the incredible journey her life had been from that desperate day on the prairie to this moment. Surrounded by love and legacy, she had lived a life beyond her wildest dreams. She had been saved by a cowboy with a kind heart, had fallen in love, had built a family and a home and a future. She had taken the second chance Yates gave her and turned it into something beautiful. As her eyes drifted closed for the last time, she was smiling. She could almost feel Yates's arms around her again, carrying her across that endless prairie toward safety, toward home, toward love, and she was not afraid because she knew he would be waiting for her just as he had waited for her all those years ago. Her cowboy, her savior, her love. The Catherine Ranch continued to thrive for generations after they were gone. The sign above the gate, a permanent reminder of the woman who had helped build it, and the man who had loved her enough to name it after her. Their descendants told the story again and again, of how their great-great-grandmother had collapsed from exhaustion on the prairie, and how their great-great-grandfather had carried her miles to safety. How that single act of compassion had sparked a love that changed everything, creating a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was a story of survival and second chances, of unexpected love found in desperate circumstances, of two people who had saved each other and built something beautiful together. It was a story that deserved to be remembered, and so it was, passed down through the generations as a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and love. And on quiet evenings when the sun set over the New Mexico prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink, the descendants of Catherine and Yates would sometimes pause in their work and look out across the endless grassland. They would think about that day so long ago when everything changed, when a cowboy riding across the prairie found a woman on the verge of death and chose to save her. They would think about the love story that grew from that moment, the life that was built, the legacy that endured. And they would be grateful, as Catherine and Yates had been grateful every day of their lives together, for the chance encounter that became an eternal love, for the desperate moment that led to decades of happiness, for the cowboy who carried a dying woman miles to safety and found his soulmate in the process. Some stories fade with time, but this one lived on, as real and powerful and beautiful as it had been on that first desperate day when two strangers became forever intertwined. The love between Catherine Zimmerman and Yates Ormond had been tested by hardship, strengthened by partnership, and ultimately proved unbreakable by time or circumstance. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, of the endless prairie, of the brave souls who built lives in an unforgiving land. And it was a love story that would never truly end, living on in the hearts and memories of every generation that came after. A shining example of what two people could build when they chose to face the world together.